The first reports came at dawn on Aquatica, filtered through the planet's vast communication networks that connected thousands of underwater cities. Yu Jin, monitoring deep space frequencies from her research station, caught the initial panic transmissions as they burst across emergency channels. Multiple contact signatures entering system perimeter. The Nereid defense coordinator's voice bubbled with confusion rather than alarm. Unknown vessel types. They're not responding to standard identification requests. Within minutes, the confusion turned to terror. The Krix fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of metal locusts. Their ships were angular and brutal, designed for one purpose: killing. They moved in perfect coordination, surrounding Aquatica's orbital platforms before the defenders could react. Yujin's hands flew over her console, switching from passive monitoring to active intelligence gathering. Her primitive human equipment suddenly displayed tactical analyses that would have impressed the Council's best military minds. She watched in growing horror as the Krix fleet positioned itself for planetary bombardment. On Aquatica's surface, or rather in the crystal cities that floated beneath its endless oceans, Nereid families went about their morning routines. Children played in kelp gardens while their parents tended to the living coral structures that formed their homes. The water around them glowed with bioluminescent art, created by generations of Nereid artists. The bombardment began without warning. Krix plasma cannons fired down from orbit, superheating entire ocean regions in seconds. The water itself became a weapon as steam explosions tore through underwater settlements. But the real horror came next. Chemical dispersal weapons that turned the planet's life-giving oceans into acid. Jin Ho was aboard a human relief ship 3 systems away when the emergency broadcasts began reaching Council space. His vessel, the Mercy's Hand, looked like a converted cargo hauler barely capable of interplanetary flight. In reality, it was one of humanity's most advanced hospital ships, disguised to look primitive and harmless. "Captain," Jin Ho called to the ship's commander, using the same broken accent he'd maintained for years. "We received distress calls from Nereid homeworld. Very bad situation." Captain Tejo nodded grimly. Like all humans in deep space, he carried sealed orders that would activate only under specific circumstances. The massacre at Aquatica qualified. "Set course for the Aquatica system," he ordered, "and send a message to Earth Command. Tell them it's time for Protocol 7. The words meant nothing to the alien crew members aboard the ship, a few Velthari, medics and a Luminary navigator who had requested passage to study human medicine. To them, it sounded like typical human confusion in the face of a crisis too large for their primitive minds to grasp. They had no idea they had just heard humanity's declaration of war. Back at the Galactic Council chambers, emergency sessions convened with all the efficiency of a committee trying to organize a birthday party. Representatives floated in their crystal seats, voices rising in carefully controlled diplomatic language that said nothing while sounding important. Hyunwoo played his role perfectly, looking confused and overwhelmed by the scope of the crisis. When he finally spoke, his voice carried just the right note of helpless sincerity. "Perhaps Earth ships could help with evacuation? We know our technology is limited, but we could carry refugees to safety." The response was swift and predictable. Counselor Kethmiran's crystalline form flashed with dismissive light patterns. "Human vessels are barely capable of interstellar flight. They would only complicate rescue operations." Council President Vorth Allen, a being of pure energy contained within a mechanical framework, spoke with the measured tones of someone making an important decision. "We appreciate humanity's desire to help, but this crisis requires sophisticated response capabilities. We suggest Earth's representatives focus on providing humanitarian aid once the immediate danger has passed." Hyunwoo bowed his head in apparent disappointment. "Of course, President. We understand our limitations." What he didn't say was that human ships were already moving toward Aquatica, not the obvious merchant vessels and research ships that the Council knew about, but the hidden fleet that had been waiting in dark space for 50 years. The reports from Aquatica grew worse by the hour. Entire underwater cities dissolved as the Krix chemical weapons spread through the ocean currents. The planet's famous coral reefs, some over 1 million years old, crumbled to ash within minutes of contact with the alien toxins. Billions of Nereids died in their homes, unable to escape the poison that turned their life-supporting water into liquid death. Those who managed to reach emergency shelters found themselves trapped as the structure's biofilters failed against weapons specifically designed to target aquatic life. The Cricks made no demands, issued no ultimatums. They simply killed with methodical efficiency, broadcasting the slaughter across galactic communication networks to ensure everyone watched. In the council chambers, debate raged over appropriate responses. Economic sanctions were proposed to be implemented over 6 months. Military intervention was discussed, requiring a vote that would take weeks to organize. Diplomatic protests were drafted, strongly worded letters that would accomplish nothing. Meanwhile, Crick's fleets began moving toward their next targets. Dalsu received his activation codes while his merchant ship was docked at a Veltari trading station. To outside observers, he appeared to be reviewing cargo manifests with his usual mixture of enthusiasm and confusion. In reality, he was coordinating with dozens of other merchant captains across council space. Arin, he called to his cultural officer, send a message to our trading partners. Tell them we're adjusting our routes due to the current unpleasantness. The message seemed innocent enough, human traders being cautious in the face of galactic crisis. But embedded within the communication were quantum-encrypted orders that activated sleeper assets across a dozen star systems. Ships that had spent years hauling cargo and playing the role of primitive merchants suddenly developed engine problems that required them to stop for repairs at very specific coordinates. Human research stations experienced power fluctuations that necessitated system-wide scans for maintenance purposes. Within hours, Earth's hidden intelligence network shifted from passive observation to active preparation. The Nereids' desperate calls for help echoed across galactic communication channels. Refugee ships, those few that escaped Aquatica's dying oceans, carried survivors whose injuries defied description. The Cricks' weapons hadn't just poisoned the water, they had created new toxins that ate through Nereid physiology at the cellular level. Jinho's relief ship was among the first to reach the evacuation zones. What he saw there would haunt him for the rest of his life. Aquatic beings whose skin dissolved before his eyes, children who had never breathed air gasping in temporary atmosphere suits, families torn apart by chemical weapons designed with surgical precision to cause maximum suffering. We need immediate medical support, he broadcast on all emergency frequencies, maintaining his role as a confused human trying to help beyond his abilities. Our facilities are not adequate for this scale of casualties. The response from Council Medical Command was bureaucratic efficiency at its worst. Human medical capabilities are noted as primitive in our databases. Please stand by for assignment of proper medical personnel. Jinho closed the channel and turned to his real crew, the human doctors and medics who had been waiting their entire careers for this moment. Their equipment, hidden beneath layers of primitive-looking medical devices, included technology that made council hospitals look like medieval surgery tents. Drop the act, he told them quietly. Save everyone you can. What happened next would become legend among the survivors. Human medical personnel who had spent years pretending to fumble with basic alien anatomy suddenly displayed surgical skills that bordered on miraculous. Life support systems that had looked barely functional began operating at efficiency levels that broke council medical records. Children who had been declared beyond saving opened their eyes. Adults whose injuries should have been fatal walked away from treatment tables. The humans who had been dismissed as medically primitive began performing miracles, but the real miracle was still coming. On Earth, in command centers buried beneath miles of rock and shielded by technology that manipulated space itself, Admiral Donghyun received the final confirmation he had been waiting for. The Cricks had revealed their true nature. The galaxy's response had revealed its weakness. It was time to show the universe what humanity truly was. Send the signal, he ordered. All units, all assets, all personnel. The masquerade is over. Across the galaxy, humans who had spent decades playing roles began to remember who they really were. The children of Earth were done pretending to be harmless. Hyunwoo adjusted his simple brown uniform and cleared his throat nervously. The massive crystal chamber of the Galactic Council stretched before him like a frozen rainbow. Hundreds of alien beings sat in their floating seats, watching him with eyes that barely hid their boredom. "Honored council members," Hyunwoo began, his voice shaking just enough to sound authentic. "Earth wishes to express our deep gratitude for allowing us to participate in today's trade discussions." A ripple of amused clicks and whistles moved through the chamber. The Velthari counselor, Keth Miran, whose crystalline body reflected light, in sharp angles made a sound that humans had learned meant contempt. His translated voice echoed through the hall. "The humans speak of participation as if they contribute anything meaningful to galactic commerce." Hyunwoo bowed his head, looking embarrassed. "We understand our limitations, counselor. We simply hope to learn from your wisdom." In the observation deck above, Sora watched the performance with professional interest. To anyone looking, she appeared to be a simple terraforming engineer, taking notes on colonial development policies. Her plain clothes and nervous manner fit perfectly with humanity's image as backward newcomers to galactic society. What the aliens couldn't see was the advanced scanner hidden in her tablet, quietly mapping the energy signatures of every defensive system in the building. The data would join thousands of similar scans from across council space, all disguised as innocent human curiosity about alien technology. Dalsu's merchant ship Lucky Star drifted lazily through the Velthari system's outer asteroid belt. His cargo hold was full of simple goods from Earth: art, food, basic manufactured items that aliens found quaint. His crew looked like typical human traders, slightly confused by advanced alien technology but eager to make a profit. The ship's real purpose had nothing to do with trade. Hidden beneath layers of primitive-looking hull plating, sophisticated sensors mapped every military installation, defense satellite, and patrol route in the system. The information flowed through quantum communicators disguised as standard navigation equipment, reaching Earth's military command within hours. "Captain," his first officer Aaron called out in accented English, playing her role as a struggling language learner. "The Velthari patrol asks why we scan the asteroid field." Dalsu grinned and activated the external speakers. "Sorry, friends. We're new to space mining, just looking for pretty rocks to sell back home." The Velthari patrol leader's response crackled with amusement. "Primitive humans and their simple desires. Proceed, but stay clear of the military zones." "Of course. Thank you for your patience with us backwards Earth people." As the patrol ships moved away, Erin allowed herself a small smile. The military zones they'd been warned away from were now precisely mapped and categorized. Every sensor placement, every shield generator, every weapon battery was recorded in Earth's growing intelligence database. Back on the council floor, Hyunwoo was wrapping up his speech with the same humble tone he'd perfected over 5 years in the position. "We know that humanity has much to learn before we can truly contribute to galactic civilization. We are grateful that the Council tolerates our crude attempts at diplomacy." The Nereid representative, her aquatic form shimmering in a mobile water tank, spoke with bubbling kindness. "Humanity's enthusiasm is refreshing even if your methods are elementary." Hyunwoo bobbed his head gratefully. "We hope that someday, perhaps in a few generations, humans might develop enough to be truly useful to the galaxy." What the council members saw was a species barely capable of spaceflight, struggling with technology that other races had mastered millennia ago. They saw humans as lucky survivors from a moderately dangerous world, kept around partly out of pity and partly as an amusing curiosity. The truth was far different. Earth's real cities stretched kilometers underground and soared into the sky, protected by energy shields that made council defenses look like paper walls. The bumbling human colonies scattered across council space sat on top of carefully chosen strategic resources and hyperspace routes. Every primitive human ship carried sensors and weapons that would have shocked the galaxy's military leaders. Most importantly, every human in council space was exactly where they needed to be. Jinho worked at a refugee processing center on the rim world of Carthia, officially helping displaced populations integrate into council society. His gentle manner and basic medical training made him popular with both refugees and local officials. Nobody suspected that his real job was psychological profiling, learning how each alien species reacted to stress, fear, and crisis. Yu Jin commanded a human research station that studied cosmic radiation near the galactic core. The station looked primitive by Council standards, barely capable of basic scientific work. In reality, it was one of the most sophisticated intelligence-gathering posts ever built, monitoring subspace communications across half the galaxy. Every transmission between Council worlds, every military order, every diplomatic message passed through monitoring equipment disguised as simple radio telescopes. The aliens gladly shared their communication frequencies with the harmless humans, never imagining that Earth's computers were listening to their every word. The masquerade had worked perfectly for 50 years. When humans first encountered the Galactic Council, Earth's leaders faced a choice. They could reveal their true capabilities and risk being seen as a threat, or they could hide their strength and learn everything possible about their new neighbors. They chose deception. Earth was a death world by galactic standards. Its gravity would crush most Council species. Its atmosphere would burn their lungs. Its weather spawned storms that could level cities. The predators that lived alongside humans would be considered nightmarish monsters on any civilized world. But humans had learned something from their harsh planet that the soft, comfortable species of the Council had forgotten: how to be patient, how to watch, how to wait for the right moment. The right moment was coming. As Hyunwoo finished his speech and bowed to polite applause, he noticed increased chatter among the Creek's delegation. The insectoid species had been making aggressive moves lately, testing Council responses to minor territorial disputes. Their mandibles clicked in patterns that human observers had learned to read as anticipation. Sora's scanners detected unusual energy signatures from Crick ships in nearby systems. Dalsu's network reported Crick's fleets moving toward Nereid space. Yujin's listening posts picked up encrypted Crick's military communications that spoke of final solutions and clearing inferior species. The reports flowed to Earth through channels hidden within innocent-looking data streams. In the depths of Earth's military command centers, officers who had waited decades for this moment began activating long-prepared contingencies. The galaxy was about to learn why patience was humanity's greatest weapon. As the Council session ended, Hyunwoo walked slowly toward the exit, maintaining his image as a simple diplomatic functionary. Behind him, alien voices discussed trade routes and cultural exchanges, blissfully unaware that every word was being recorded and analyzed. Soon, very soon, those same voices would whisper of the day the Deathworlders dropped their mask. The day the galaxy learned what mercy looked like when it had teeth. But for now, the charade continued. Humans stumbled through conversations, smiled helplessly at alien condescension, and pretended to be grateful for scraps of attention from their betters. Tomorrow, the pretending would end. Tonight, Earth's children prepared for war. 6 months after the revelation, the galaxy had settled into a new reality that few species fully understood, but all had learned to respect. Ambassador Sunho stood at the same podium where Hyunwoo had once played the bumbling primitive, but the atmosphere in the Galactic Council chambers was completely different. When he spoke, the vast crystalline hall fell silent. When he made suggestions, representatives took careful notes. When he expressed humanity's position on any issue, it carried the weight of absolute military superiority, tempered by demonstrated mercy. The integration of former Crick's territories proceeds ahead of schedule, Sunho reported to the assembled council. Civilian populations have been successfully transitioned to peaceful economic activities. Crime rates in the affected regions have dropped to levels lower than most council worlds. Educational programs are producing the first generation of Crick's children who will grow up without military indoctrination. The statistics were remarkable, but the underlying reality was even more impressive. Humanity had accomplished something that most species considered impossible. They had completely transformed a militaristic civilization into a peaceful society within months rather than generations. Director Boram watched the proceedings from the observation gallery, her presence a reminder of the new galactic security framework that humanity had quietly implemented. The Human Protection Initiative operated from facilities that dwarfed anything the Council had ever constructed, coordinating defense operations across thousands of star systems with efficiency that made the old peacekeeping forces look like amateur volunteers. Any questions about our current operations? Sunho asked the Council. The Velthari representative Kethmyron raised a crystalline appendage. His tone had changed dramatically from the condescending dismissal he had once used when addressing humans. Ambassador Sunho, our analysts are still trying to understand how humanity achieved such comprehensive intelligence coverage. Our estimates suggest that monitoring the galaxy at the level you demonstrated would require resources exceeding those of all Council species combined. Sunho's smile was gentle but informed by knowledge that most beings couldn't grasp. Counselor, Kethmyron, your estimates assume that intelligence gathering is separate from normal civilian activities. For humans, observation and analysis are natural behaviors that we integrate into everything we do. The truth was both simpler and more complex than most species could understand. Humans hadn't built a massive spy network. They had turned every human in space into an unconscious intelligence asset. Every merchant cataloged trade routes and defense installations. Every researcher mapped population centers and resource distributions. Every cultural exchange student analyzed social structures and psychological vulnerabilities. The galaxy's species had welcomed humans as harmless observers, never realizing that observation was humanity's greatest weapon. Philosopher Chang Min published his analysis 6 months after the revelation, in a work that quickly became required reading in universities across the galaxy. His central thesis was elegant in its simplicity. Humanity's greatest achievement wasn't hiding their power, but understanding when to reveal it. The masquerade wasn't deception, he wrote. It was patience. Humanity waited until the galaxy needed them to be what they truly were. Not conquerors, but guardians who understood that sometimes protection requires the capacity for overwhelming violence. His writings explored the philosophical implications of a species that had chosen to appear weak in order to avoid frightening their neighbors. The decision to maintain the pretense for 50 years demonstrated a level of collective self-control that most civilizations couldn't achieve for 50 days. More importantly, it showed that humanity's true strength wasn't their technology or their military capabilities. It was their ability to make difficult choices for the benefit of others. The Nereid homeworld of Aquatica had become a symbol of humanity's approach to galactic stewardship. Where the Crix had turned oceans into acid within hours, human terraforming technology had restored the planet's biosphere within weeks. The process used techniques that operated on principles most Council scientists didn't understand. But the results spoke for themselves. Coral reefs that had taken millions of years to evolve were regrown in days. Aquatic ecosystems that should have required centuries to reestablish were functioning at full capacity within months. Nereid children who had never expected to see their homeworld again were swimming in crystal-clear waters that were cleaner than they had been before the attack. "How is this possible?" asked the Nereid Council representative during one of Sunho's briefings. "Our scientists estimated that full ecological recovery would take millennia. Your scientists were working within the limitations of known galactic technology," Sunho replied. "Human terraforming operates on different principles. We don't just restore environments, we improve them." The implications were staggering. If humanity could rebuild a poisoned planet in weeks, what else were they capable of? The answer was becoming clear as human aid projects transformed worlds across the galaxy. Desert planets became garden worlds within months. Asteroid mining, operations that had been considered economically impossible, became routine. Transportation networks that had limited interstellar commerce for millennia were upgraded with technology that made hyperspace travel as safe and reliable as walking across a room. The galaxy was prospering under human protection in ways that exceeded anyone's expectations. But the most profound changes were cultural rather than technological. Species that had spent centuries locked in border disputes suddenly found their conflicts mediated by beings who understood both sides better. than the participants themselves. Trade wars that had simmered for generations were resolved through economic reforms that benefited everyone involved. Territorial claims that had seemed irreconcilable were settled through resource-sharing agreements that made conflict pointless. Humanity didn't impose solutions. They offered alternatives that were so obviously superior that adoption became inevitable. Captain Yunji commanded patrols that covered territory larger than some species' entire empires, but her crews never felt stretched thin. Human logistics operated with efficiency that turned impossible tasks into routine operations. Supply lines that should have required massive infrastructure functioned through networks so subtle that most species didn't realize they existed. "Status report," she requested from her tactical officer during a routine patrol through the former Krix territories. "All sectors secure, Captain. No hostile activity detected in 47 days. Local populations are reporting continued improvement in living standards. 3 former military installations have requested conversion to research facilities. The transformation was remarkable. Regions that had been centers of military aggression were becoming hubs of scientific advancement. Krix communities that had been raised on conquest were discovering the satisfaction of contributing to galactic knowledge and prosperity. Any requests for human assistance with local projects? 14 requests for terraforming consultation, 6 requests for educational program development, and 23 requests for trade route optimization. All are being processed through standard civilian channels. This was perhaps the most impressive aspect of humanity's new role in galactic affairs. They had demonstrated the ability to destroy civilizations in days, but they spent their time helping species achieve prosperity that would have been impossible under the old council system. The galaxy was learning that true power wasn't the ability to take what you wanted. It was the ability to give others what they needed. As the first anniversary of the revelation approached, historians across the galaxy were struggling to understand what they had witnessed. The transformation of galactic civilization in such a short time seemed impossible by all known precedents. Changmin's final essay on the subject became the most widely quoted analysis of the event. "They say the Deathworlders dropped their mask that day, but I think they simply showed us what mercy looks like when it has teeth. The galaxy still whispers of it because we finally understand. Humanity wasn't hiding from us. They were hiding from themselves, waiting for the day they would have no choice but to become what their world made them. We are all grateful that, when that day came, they chose to be our protectors rather than our conquerors." The whispers continued across 1,000 worlds, carried by species who had witnessed the impossible, a civilization powerful enough to reshape the galaxy, choosing instead to nurture it. In the depths of space, human fleets maintained their silent vigil, ensuring that no species would face extinction through military aggression. On countless worlds, human advisors helped civilizations reach potential they had never imagined possible. Throughout the galaxy, human observers continued their patient work, watching and learning and protecting. The masquerade was over, but the mission continued. Humanity had revealed themselves not as conquerors but as gardeners, tending a galaxy that they could have dominated but chose instead to cultivate. The galaxy whispered of the day the Deathworlders dropped their mask, because it was the day they learned what it meant to be truly safe. For the first time in galactic history, every species could sleep peacefully, knowing that something stronger than the war lasted 72 hours. In galactic terms, this was impossibly short. Most military campaigns between civilized species took months to plan and years to execute. The concept of completely eliminating a space-faring civilization in 3 days was so absurd that most species didn't have words for it. The humans called it Tuesday through Thursday. Marine Haywan stood in the command center of Krix Prime, looking out through crystalline windows at the capital city below. 3 days ago, this had been the heart of a military empire that controlled dozens of star systems and commanded billions of soldiers. Now it was a conquered world whose surviving population numbered in the thousands, rather than billions. "Final casualty reports, ma'am," her communications officer said, handing her a data tablet. Haywan scanned the numbers with professional interest. Crick's military losses, 99.7% of all personnel. Crick's civilian casualties, less than 0.1% of the total population. Human casualties, 43 injured, none killed. The numbers told a story that would reshape how the galaxy understood warfare. How did we manage such precise targeting? Asked Dr. Nara, who had served as a diplomatic aide for 15 years, while actually being one of humanity's most skilled intelligence operatives. Simple, Haywan replied, pointing to the data streams flowing across her tactical display. We knew exactly where everyone was. The truth was staggering in its implications. For over 2 decades, humans throughout Crick's space had been conducting what they called passive population monitoring. Every Crick civilian, every military installation, every government facility had been cataloged and tracked by human observers who appeared to be simple merchants, researchers, and cultural exchange students. When the war began, human forces didn't attack blindly. They struck with surgical precision, eliminating military targets while carefully avoiding civilian areas. Crick's soldiers found themselves facing enemies who knew their base layouts better than they did. Government officials discovered that their secure bunkers had been mapped decades earlier by human archaeologists studying Crick's historical sites. The Crick's collective hadn't just been defeated, it had been dissected by opponents who understood them completely. Intelligence Officer Jun Seok coordinated the systematic dismantling of Crick society from his command ship in orbit around their former homeworld. For 18 years he had posed as a simple cultural researcher, writing academic papers about Crick's social structures while actually mapping every aspect of their civilization. Sir, his aide reported, we've confirmed the last Crick's fleet has been eliminated. The vessels that escaped our initial strikes have been hunted down in the outer rim systems. Junsok nodded, checking the tactical display that showed the complete collapse of Crick's military power. Ships that had terrorized the galaxy for the past decade were now expanding clouds of debris. Bases that had been considered impregnable were silent ruins. What about civilian evacuation? All non-military personnel have been relocated to designated safe zones. Medical teams report that most Crick survivors are responding well to treatment for combat stress. We estimate full psychological recovery within 6 months. This was perhaps the most shocking aspect of humanity's military response. While eliminating the Cricks as a military threat, human forces had simultaneously conducted the largest rescue operation in galactic history. Crick civilians who had expected to die in the crossfire instead found themselves in refugee camps that provided better living conditions than many of their original homes. The humans weren't just superior at warfare, they were superior at mercy. Captain, Yunji's fleet patrolled the former Crick's territories, ensuring that no surviving military elements could regroup. Her ships moved through space with the confidence of apex predators, their sensors detecting and cataloging everything within light years of their positions. Captain, her tactical officer reported, we're receiving surrender offers from 17 different Crick's military commanders. They're requesting terms for laying down arms. Standard terms, Yunji replied without hesitation. Full surrender, complete disarmament, cooperation with war crimes tribunals. In exchange, they get medical treatment, legal representation, and eventual reintegration into civilian society. The officer looked surprised. Those are remarkably generous terms for an enemy that just committed genocide. Hyunji's expression was thoughtful as she considered her response. The Crick's military followed orders from leaders who chose aggression. Now those leaders are gone, and the remaining soldiers are just people who need to learn how to live without war. Our job isn't to punish them, it's to make sure they never threaten innocent civilians again. This philosophy was being implemented across every former Crick's world. Human occupation forces weren't conquerors interested in subjugation. They were something far more dangerous to military-minded species. They were teachers who understood that lasting peace required changing how entire civilizations thought about conflict. The galaxy watched in fascination as humanity demonstrated what total victory actually looked like. Traditional galactic warfare focused on forcing enemies to surrender through economic pressure or limited military action. The concept of completely eliminating a hostile government while simultaneously rebuilding the underlying society was so alien that most species struggled to understand it. The humans made it look routine. One Ho supervised the conversion of former Krik's military installations into civilian infrastructure. Weapons factories became medical centers. Military training facilities were transformed into educational institutions. Orbital defense platforms were repurposed as communication relays that connected isolated Krik's communities to galactic information networks. The integration is proceeding ahead of schedule, he reported to Earth Command. Former Krik's territories should be fully pacified and economically stable within 18 months. What he didn't mention was that pacification, in human terms, meant something very different from what other species understood. The humans weren't interested in creating puppet states or extracting tribute. They were systematically restructuring Krik society to eliminate the cultural factors that had led to military aggression in the first place. Krik's children who had been raised on stories of conquest and domination were introduced to human concepts like cooperation, scientific advancement, and artistic expression. Adults who had spent their lives in military service were given opportunities to contribute to civilian projects that built rather than destroyed. The transformation was so thorough that within weeks, former Krik's soldiers were volunteering to help with reconstruction efforts, but the most profound changes were happening in the Galactic Council. The emergency sessions had evolved from panic into something approaching religious awe. Species that had governed the galaxy for millennia were struggling to understand what they had witnessed. The humans eliminated an entire civilization in 3 days. The Nereid representative bubbled with wonder. But they did it without committing genocide. They separated the military threat from the civilian population with precision that shouldn't be possible. Counselor Keth Mirren's crystalline form displayed patterns that indicated deep confusion. Our military analysts cannot explain how they achieved such results. The logistics alone should have required years of preparation. Decades of preparation, Hyunwoo corrected gently. We've been ready for this possibility since we first encountered galactic civilization. The implications were staggering. While the Council had been dismissing humanity as primitive and harmless, Earth had been conducting the most comprehensive intelligence operation in galactic history. Every human in space had been simultaneously playing their assigned role while gathering information that would be used to protect innocent species from military aggression. Why didn't you reveal your capabilities earlier? Asked Council President Vorthalin. You could have taken leadership of galactic defense decades ago. Hyunwoo's response was simple and devastating. Because you weren't ready to learn what real protection looks like. You preferred committees and debates to decisive action. We gave you 50 years to develop effective responses to military aggression. When the Kriks proved that your methods had failed, we provided an alternative. The alternative was now visible across the galaxy. Human fleets patrolled former Kriks territories with efficiency that made Council peacekeeping forces look like children playing with toys. Refugee operations that would have taken the Council months to organize were completed in days. Reconstruction projects that should have required decades of planning were already underway. Most importantly, surviving. Kriks populations were being integrated into galactic society instead of being exterminated or enslaved. The species that had committed genocide was learning to become productive members of a peaceful civilization. The galaxy was witnessing something unprecedented: total military victory combined with comprehensive rehabilitation of the defeated enemy. And they were beginning to understand that this was just a demonstration. Human capabilities went far beyond what they had revealed. The fleets that had destroyed the Kriks represented a fraction of Earth's true military power. The intelligence networks that had mapped every aspect of Krik society also had complete information about every other species in the galaxy. For the first sign that something had changed came when human ships across the galaxy suddenly developed identical technical problems. From the merchant vessel, Lucky Star in Velthari space, to the research platform Deep Thought near the galactic core, every human ship reported the same issue: engine fluctuations that required immediate diagnostic procedures. The aliens saw it as typical human incompetence with advanced technology. What they didn't realize was that those diagnostic procedures were actually high-powered scans, capable of mapping entire star systems in minutes. Captain Yunji stood on the bridge of the HSS Retribution, watching her tactical display as red markers appeared across the screen. Each marker represented a Krix military installation, previously hidden but now exposed by scanning technology that the galaxy didn't know humans possessed. Target acquisition complete. Her tactical officer reported, "We have firing solutions on all enemy positions in this sector." "Excellent. Communications, open a channel to all Krix vessels in the area." The response came quickly, harsh clicking sounds that translated as arrogant dismissal. "Unknown vessel. You are in restricted military space. Identify yourself immediately, or face destruction." Yunji smiled. For 15 years she had waited for this moment. "This is Captain Yunji of the human Space Navy vessel Retribution. You have exactly 30 seconds to surrender your ships and submit to galactic justice for your crimes against the Nerid people." The Krix response was predictable, harsh laughter translated through universal communicators. "Humans? The primitive. Mammals think they can threaten the Krix collective? Your pathetic species can barely manage interplanetary flight. 20 seconds. We will enjoy adding your weak flesh to our collection. All units, target the human vessel. Show them what real power looks like." 10 seconds. The Krix fleet moved into attack formation. 12 heavy cruisers and 40 escort vessels, enough firepower to glass a planet. Against any known human ship, it would have been overwhelming. The Retribution wasn't any known human ship. "Time's up," Yunji said quietly. "Fire." What happened next would be discussed in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. The human ship didn't just attack the Krix fleet. It dismantled them with surgical precision that bordered on art. Weapons that operated on principles the Council had never seen reached across impossible distances to strike targets that shouldn't have been vulnerable. Krix shields designed to stop anything in the galactic arsenal collapsed like soap bubbles. Their armor, forged from metals that were supposed to be impenetrable, vaporized on contact with human energy weapons. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. 49 Krix ships were reduced to expanding clouds of debris. 3 managed to escape into hyperspace, their crews forever changed by what they had witnessed. Human casualties, 0. "Communications broadcast on all frequencies," Yunji ordered. "Let everyone hear this." Her voice, calm and professional, carried across the galaxy's communication networks. Every species, every world, every ship in space heard the same message. This is humanity. For 50 years we have walked among you as students, merchants, and researchers. We have accepted your condescension with patience and your dismissal with grace. We have pretended to be weak so that you would not fear us. That pretense ends now. She paused, looking at the debris field that had once been a Krix fleet. "We are not your pets. We are not your charity cases. We are not the primitive species you believed us to be. We are the children of a world that kills the unprepared, and we have been preparing for this moment since the day we first reached the stars." Across the galaxy, humans were dropping their masks simultaneously. Kyung-Soo emerged from his apartment in the Krix capital with equipment that would have impressed the Council's best intelligence operatives. For 23 years, he had mapped every critical facility on the planet, while playing the role of a bumbling academic. Now, moving with the fluid grace of a predator, he began systematically disabling the Krix government's ability to coordinate their military response. Communication centers went dark. Command bunkers found their security systems mysteriously failing. Military leaders discovered that their secure networks had been compromised by a human who had been listening to their conversations for over 2 decades. Within hours, the Krix, Homeworld's government, was paralyzed, unable to contact their fleets or coordinate defensive measures. One-Ho's terraforming sites across the galaxy revealed their true nature. What had appeared to be struggling human colonies were actually massive industrial complexes, their capabilities hidden beneath sophisticated camouflage. Factories that the aliens thought were barely capable of producing basic tools began launching warships by the dozen. The Council had estimated that humanity could produce maybe one new vessel per year with their primitive technology. The truth was that human manufacturing capabilities exceeded those of any three Council species combined. In the Galactic Council chambers, emergency sessions had devolved into chaos. Representatives who had spent decades looking down on humanity as backward primitives were struggling to process what they were witnessing. "This is impossible." Councillor Kethmiran's crystalline form flashed with patterns that indicated severe distress. "Humans don't possess this level of technology. Our intelligence reports clearly show—" "Your intelligence reports show exactly what we wanted you to see," Hyunwoo interrupted, his voice no longer carrying the humble, nervous tone that Council members had grown accustomed to. He stood from his seat with the confident posture of someone who had spent years pretending to be smaller than he was. When he spoke again, his words carried the authority of someone representing a military power that had just demonstrated its ability to destroy fleets with casual ease. "For 50 years, humanity has maintained the fiction that we are a primitive species struggling to understand advanced civilization. We did this not to deceive you, but to protect you from what we are capable of when diplomacy fails." The chamber fell silent. Species that had dismissed human intelligence were suddenly wondering what else they had misunderstood. The Crix Collective has chosen to demonstrate that this galaxy's current peacekeeping methods are inadequate. They have murdered billions of innocent beings while the Council debated appropriate responses. This is unacceptable. Hyunwoo's image flickered, replaced by tactical displays showing Crix fleets being systematically destroyed across multiple star systems. Human ships that had been hiding in dark space for decades were emerging to engage targets with devastating effectiveness. As of this moment, humanity assumes responsibility for galactic security. Any species that attempts large-scale aggression against civilian populations will face the same response that the Crix are currently experiencing. The Crix delegate tried to speak, his mandibles clicking with fury, but his voice was cut off by an override signal. "The Crix representative no longer speaks for a government," Hyunwoo continued calmly. "Their command structure has been neutralized. Their fleets are being eliminated. Their worlds are under occupation by forces they cannot see or fight effectively." The truth of his words was confirmed by reports streaming in from across Council space. Crix military installations were going dark one by one. Their fleets, which had seemed unstoppable just hours before, were being hunted down by human ships that appeared from nowhere and disappeared back into the void. But the most shocking reports came from Crix-occupied worlds. Human forces weren't just attacking military targets. They were liberating occupied planets with precision that defied belief. Crix occupation forces found themselves facing enemies that moved like ghosts through terrain that should have provided perfect cover. Human soldiers seemed to know exactly where every enemy position was located, as if they had been studying the terrain for years. In many cases, they had been. The human refugees who had fled Crix aggression over the past year were actually advanced reconnaissance teams. The humanitarian aid workers who had been helping displaced populations were intelligence operatives mapping enemy positions and capabilities. Every human the Crix had encountered during their expansion had been gathering information, preparing for the day when their species would respond to galactic aggression with overwhelming force. Marine Haiwan led the assault on a Crix supply depot that was supposed to be impregnable. Her team moved through the facility's defenses like they owned the place because in a sense they did. Human intelligence had provided complete blueprints of every corridor, every security system, every defensive position. The Crix defenders found themselves fighting enemies who knew their base better than they did. "Target secured," Haiwan reported, as her team finished processing the facility's personnel. "Crix soldiers have been subdued and are ready for transport to prisoner processing centers." Her tone was professional, almost bored. To her, this wasn't a desperate battle against overwhelming odds. It was a routine military operation against an enemy that had been thoroughly studied and prepared for. Across the galaxy, similar reports flooded communication networks. Crix forces that had seemed unstoppable were being systematically dismantled by human military units that fought with the efficiency of a species that had evolved to be perfect predators. The galaxy was learning why Earth was deep beneath the surface of Earth. In caverns that stretched for kilometers through solid rock, Admiral Dong Hyun stood before a holographic display that would have made the Galactic Council's finest technology look like a child's toy. The image showed the galaxy in perfect detail, every star system, every inhabited world, every military installation known to exist. Red markers indicated Crick's positions, blue showed Council defenses, and scattered throughout, invisible to everyone except Earth's command structure, were thousands of green markers representing human assets. "Dr. Mi-young, report," Dong-hyun commanded. The xenobiologist appeared beside him, her decades of research finally bearing fruit. Where the galaxy saw her as a simple cultural exchange scientist, she had spent 30 years cataloging the biological weaknesses of every known species. All species profiles confirmed and updated, Admiral. The Velthari crystalline structure resonates at frequencies within human vocal range, specifically around 440 Hz. The luminary energy forms destabilize when exposed to standard electromagnetic fields generated by our basic technology. The Crick's nervous system is vulnerable to bacterial agents that humans carry naturally in our digestive tract. And the Nereids? Their biochemistry is actually similar to ours in many ways. They'll recover from the Crick's weapons if given proper treatment. Mi-young's expression hardened. Treatment that only we can provide. Dong-hyun nodded. Around him, the command center hummed with activity that had been hidden from the galaxy for 5 decades. Officers moved between stations that monitored everything, from Crick's fleet movements to council meeting schedules. The technology surrounding them was so advanced that most galactic species would have needed years just to understand its basic functions. Status of hidden fleet assets? Commander Wan-ho stepped forward. For 20 years, he had played the role of a terraforming engineer, establishing human colonies on worthless worlds across the galaxy. What the Council didn't know was that every one of those colonies sat on strategically vital resources or hyperspace junctions. All manufacturing facilities are operational, Admiral. We can produce a full battle fleet in 3 weeks if needed. Current assets include 4,000 stealth vessels, 1,200 heavy cruisers, and 300 dreadnought-class ships. The numbers would have shocked the Galactic Council. By their estimates, humanity possessed maybe 50 interstellar vessels, most of them barely capable of basic spaceflight. The truth was that Earth's hidden shipyards had been working for decades, building a fleet that could conquer the known galaxy if necessary. But conquest wasn't the plan. Protection was. "Sir," a communications officer called out, "we're receiving Protocol 7 confirmations from all deep space assets. Every operative is in position and awaiting orders." Dong-hyun looked at the display again. Green markers pulsed across the galaxy, humans who had spent their adult lives pretending to be something they weren't. Merchants who were actually military, analysts, scientists who were really intelligence officers, cultural attachés who could kill with their bare hands, all of them waiting for the word to drop their masks. "Send the activation signal," he ordered. "Operation Shepherd begins now." Light years away, Captain Yoonji received the coded transmission aboard her vessel, the HSS Retribution. For 15 years, the ship had been disguised as a deep space research platform, studying cosmic radiation in the empty space between systems. The Crick's fleets had passed near it dozens of times, never suspecting that they were being watched by one of the most advanced warships ever built. "All stations, this is the captain," Yoonji announced over the ship's internal communications. "Drop stealth protocols. Activate all combat systems. It's time to show the galaxy who we really are." The transformation was remarkable. External panels that had looked like primitive sensor arrays folded back to reveal weapons that operated on principles the Council's scientists had only theorized about. The ship's hull, which had appeared to be basic metal plating, flickered and became something that seemed to bend light around it. Within minutes, the Retribution went from looking like a harmless research vessel to appearing as what it truly was: a predator built for one purpose. Similar transformations were happening across the galaxy. Human merchant ships suddenly bristled with hidden weapons. Research stations revealed themselves as military installations. Primitive colonies activated defensive systems that made Council worlds look defenseless. But the most important transformation was happening to the humans themselves. Kyung-soo had spent 23 years on the Crick's homeworld, officially studying their culture for the Council's xenological database. He lived in a small apartment in the capital city, spoke fluent Cricks, and was known to his neighbors as a harmless human academic who asked too many questions about their history. What they didn't know was that he had mapped every government, facility, military installation, and command bunker on the planet. His academic research had given him access to Crick's leadership, their communication networks, and their military planning. For over 2 decades, he had been the perfect spy, hidden in plain sight. When his communicator chirped with the activation code, Kyung-soo smiled for the first time in years. He opened his closet and pulled out equipment that had been waiting there since his arrival: weapons, sensors, and communication gear that represented the cutting edge of human military technology. The Cricks had made a fatal mistake. They had started a war with a species that had been preparing for it longer than most civilizations had existed. On Earth, the real cities were coming alive. For 50 years, humanity had shown the galaxy carefully constructed settlements that looked primitive and struggling. The truth was that Earth's actual population centers were marvels of engineering that stretched deep underground and high into the atmosphere, all hidden beneath sophisticated camouflage systems. Taeho had commanded what appeared to be a simple merchant vessel for 12 years. His cargo hold carried basic goods from Earth: art, food, manufactured items that aliens found quaint. His crew looked like typical human traders, slightly confused by advanced technology but eager to make profits from more sophisticated species. The reality was very different. His ship's true cargo hold contained enough firepower to level a small moon. His crew were some of Earth's finest military personnel, trained in combat techniques that took advantage of humanity's deathworld origins. The trading routes he had established over the years put human assets within striking distance of every major Crick's installation in Council space. "All hands, this is the captain," Taeho announced. "Combat stations. Today we show the galaxy what Earth's merchants really trade in." The transformation of the Lucky Star was even more dramatic than that of the Retribution. External hull plating shifted to reveal weapon systems that had been hidden for over a decade. The ship's reactor, which had appeared to be a simple fusion plant, powered up to reveal energy output that matched Council dreadnoughts. Similar scenes played out across dozens of star systems. Humans who had been dismissed as backward primitives were revealing technology that made the galaxy's most advanced civilizations look like children playing with toys. But technology was only part of humanity's advantage. The real secret was what Earth had done to its children. Every human in space had been born and raised on a world that would kill most galactic species within hours. The gravity alone would crush Nereids or Luminari. The atmospheric pressure would poison Velthari. The weather patterns regularly produced storms that generated more energy than most planets' defense systems. And in that hellish environment, humanity had learned to thrive. The humans scattered across Council space weren't just pretending to be primitive. They were actively restraining themselves, holding back reflexes and abilities that their deathworld had burned into their very genetics. When a human moved clumsily in alien environments, they were actually compensating for gravity that felt impossibly light. When they seemed confused by alien technology, they were processing information at speeds that would overwhelm most species. Now, for the first time in 50 years, they were free to be what their planet had made them. Dr. Mi Young's biological profiles weren't just academic research. They were tactical intelligence gathered by a species that had evolved to be perfect hunters. Every human who had lived among aliens had been unconsciously cataloging weaknesses, studying behavioral patterns, learning exactly how to kill every species they encountered. Not because they wanted to, but because survival on Earth had taught them that knowing your environment completely was the difference between life and death. The galaxy was about to learn why Earth was classified as a death world, and why the species that had survived there was not something you wanted as an enemy. In Nair, the depths of space, human fleets that had been hidden for decades began to move toward their targets. They traveled through hyperspace routes that only they knew existed, using navigation techniques developed on a world where getting lost meant dying. The Cricks had started a war expecting to face a galaxy of soft, committee-bound species who would debate appropriate responses while their worlds burned. Instead, they had awakened something that had been patiently waiting for exactly this moment. The children of Earth were coming, and they were done playing nice.